to do other things. How many minutes do you think they will dedicate to going through one CV? Random. Just how many? Yes? 1 minute. That's a good guess. 2 minutes. I'm loving the range because that's about where it plays. That's about where it plays because he has to sort through this or she has to sort through these CVs in about an hour or two. So if I'm just having a look at your CV and I'm not seeing what I'm looking for, I don't have time to start paying attention kusoma line by line. All right? The CV that I will read in detail is the CV that pops up and I'm like, this is an interesting CV. Then I look deeply, because like, let me see, actually this works. But if the CV doesn't catch me in the first 1 minute of looking at it, I go to the next. Manishika. So that was the first problem. So someone is competent, but they don't know how to present that on a CV, so opportunities zinampita too. The second part is, this person, you get them in the room and they don't know how to explain it themselves. They don't know how to tell their story. So when you start thinking, this is really fake. Unajua? Because you're not giving me the same type of energy as the CV gave me. So you have a good CV, but when you show up in the room, I'm like, if it's the same person, it doesn't match. So having to deal with all of this, that's where CV Tap came from. And our main role is to help individuals and people like you who are students, people who are looking to transition their careers, all these people, to be able to give them like the inside information. You see, we come from recruitment, so we know what we're looking for. If it's a good interview, we know what a good interview looks like. If it's a good CV, we know what it looks like. If it's market trends, we are right in the middle of it. So most of our services, currently we have 5 services. The first one is CV writing. The second one is cover letter writing. The third one is LinkedIn optimization. We're going to talk a little bit about LinkedIn. The fourth one is interview coaching. I think a lot of you need it. And the fifth one is aptitude test training. If you're going into a tech firm, you're going to have an aptitude test for most of you. So that is the other thing that we do train. So those are the 5 things that we do. And apart from that, we do sessions like this. We have webinars that we do host so that we can share everything that I'm going to share here and probably in future sessions so that all of you can learn. So that's why we exist. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm standing in front of you. But today we are talking about personal branding. So we have talked about, mentioned names now. We have mentioned names, we have mentioned brands, we have mentioned all of these things. So let's go back to the question of, what is a personal brand? But before we break down personal brand, because our topic today covers 3 things. There is the brand, there is the personal brand, and then there is the personal brand on digital. So that's where we want to end up. We want to communicate, all we want to communicate on digital. So, what is a brand? A brand has to have 2 parties involved. I know you're thinking, you think about it as yourself, but it has to have 2 parties involved. And the first party is you. But the second party who is going to be involved is going to be your audience. The reason all of you have mentioned those personal brands that you've mentioned is because you are on the other side of receiving. And you being on the other side of receiving, whatever that person projected, you saw it, you liked it, you followed, right? So the first thing is that it's going to be 2-pronged. So when you're thinking about your personal brand, don't only think about yourself, you know that you have to factor in your audience because it's a way of communicating. The other thing that a brand has to have is something called a promise. So this is generally what a brand has to have. It's a promise. For me, I've told you about CV It Up and what we are trying to do, right? So if tomorrow you come to us and tell us, hey, CV It Up, I have a problem with my CV, can you help me? I have a problem with how I'm doing my interviews, I'm not confident, I don't know how to prepare, whatever. You come to us. And why do you come to us? It's because we made to you a promise that if you came to us with such and such a problem, we will solve it. So a brand has to have two parties involved. The other thing, it has to have a promise involved. That's why, going back to our Willy Paul example, mnakumbuka tuliweka pin on Willy Paul. Willy Paul alianza na Mungu sitolia, sio? Na tukampenda sana. Right? And then right now, I don't know. Who was the latest song in Willy Paul ni gani? Hii watu mnamkana. And it's because Willy Paul gave us one promise when he was starting, and in his interviews, in all his engagements, he was like, yo, manzeni Saja, all the way. Sio? Na tukampenda na tukamwambia hiyo kama Saja, tutakusupport, tuende kutoa. And then katikati ako like, no guys, I don't think this is going to work. Let's do something else. And was like, I don't think I identify with that Willy Paul. No, that's not my style. When you change the promise, the people who follow you for this one promise, they change. There are people who love Willy Paul as he is right now because they love the promise he is giving right now. Now to switch back to gospel, bado kutakuwa na scandal because kuna watu wataha to break on the other side because jana wako like, yo, we're not but we will switch tena. So that's the thing with a brand. A brand has okay. So yeah, a brand has to have a promise. Okay? So when you're thinking about your socials, when you're thinking about your LinkedIn, your Instagram, ask yourself the question, what is it I'm promising people? If someone is going to follow me, ni nini nampromise kesho akikuja kwa this same page atapata? You getting me? That's the way you should be thinking about it. Because it's the same thing as when you get employed with certain terms and you have a certain agreement. But there is an implicit promise that you make that if it's an 8 to 5, I'll be showing up here every day at 8, Monday to Friday. And you make that sort of an agreement. So actually that brings me to the third concept or aspect of a brand. For a brand to work, there has to be an agreement. There has to be an agreement. And the agreement is between the two parties. You and your audience have to agree. I like your promise. I want to consume what you are promising, so I will subscribe. Wale YouTubers. Good morning, guys. Get ready with me. As you're going shopping, so you're happy. And they're like, yeah, I like the vibe of this girl. I'd like to see her shopping more. So I'm going to sign the agreement contract. And the way you do that is you subscribe. Simple. The occasion, akifanya a similar thing, you see it. And that's the full circle of a brand. So it has two parties, it has a promise, and it has an agreement. So I'm a digital marketer. That's my background. Nasikia watu walikuwa hapo before wameongelesha a lot about social media nini. So that's where I come from. So a lot of my work is around working with brands and asking ourselves the question of how do we get more people interested in our brand? And for me, a lot of my work is measured with how many people have agreed that whatever we're offering makes sense. And then they follow, right? So the way you know that your brand is working or not working is by the number of agreements that you're having. And on socials, that's very easy to measure. That's very easy to measure on socials. How many sort of agreements are you having? However, there is a nuance. Sisi wote tunataka kuwa influencers. ati tunataka kuwa na 100k followers, ndio? So probably your sort of argument is a different one. For instance, on LinkedIn, you don't have to have 100,000 followers. However, you can use that tool to brand yourself as a software developer, in that someone can see what you're doing on LinkedIn, and instead of following you, engage with you in a project. I like what you're doing here, I like nini, are you interested in this? So for you, the way you're measuring your agreement is not in the following, it's in the other form of conversion. So you can define conversion the way you want. But before we get so deep into that, how do you create your narrative of your promise as a person? So now you're here, you're in school, you're learning, there is a lot that you're picking up, you're thinking, what direction do I want to go? Let me have a poll in the room. For you, let me hear. When you're optimizing or choosing a career or an industry or a company to work for, what is your number one motivation? What are you looking at? Let me just have randoms. Badala ya kwenda around. Yes? Yes. Money, that's one. How many people want money? Hey, kuna watu, they don't care about money. I love you, Mazi. Yes, there are people who are optimizing for money. What is the other thing that people optimize for? Yes? Work culture. Super, I love that. Yes? Exposure. Super, I love that. What else? What else are you optimizing for? Opportunities for growth. I'm loving, hey, you're brilliant, you guys. Hizi vitu already mshaanza kufikiria. Career development. I love all these answers. So, there is money, there is opportunities for growth, career development, there is a work culture, there is, I'm forgetting? Exposure, and all of these things. So, when you're thinking about going out, what is your motivation for doing that? And I want to take you kind of kidogo, because I know money is a big conversation in what we're doing. However, for me, I have a bit of a controversial take on that. And that is, you see what he has said about work culture? That is very, very important. And I want to paint to you a scenario. So tell me, two people. One person is very passionate about software development. Walianza kucode sijui wakiwa wapi, as soon as they landed on a computer, they started coding. They do that all night without even thinking about it. They just find themselves there and they are coding. So that's a person who is very passionate about that. On the other side, there is a person who looks into the industry and is like, napenda hizi Subaru zinatembea hapa, I wouldn't mind one. So, yeah, my tech bros na Audi na nini, unaona hiyo uko like, I really want that. So what are they doing? Unaambiwa, what these guys do, they are software developers. You're like, you know what? I got you. Unaingia pale, unatafuta either kama ni community hapa Nairobi, unaenda kulearn, kama ni online, kama unatafuta Mhindi, so kuna Wahindi pale YouTube. Yes, unaingia pale, you invest your time and you do it. And then all of you get a job, Microsoft, let's use that example. Entry pale, entry level job. You get into the company, you start working. But then work starts to speed up. And it starts to speed up. Kidogo kidogo, unaanza kurealize someone is being left behind. In very small measures, little measures, they are being left behind. Between the person who is passionate and the person who did it for the money, who is going to be left behind? The person who was